They look for a slightly unself-confident young girl, which is every girl at some point in high school has a bad day, doesn't feel super confident, right? And they fall in love with her and they ask her out on a date and they say, "Oh, nice to meet you, Mrs. Jones, and sir, nice to meet you, and I'm going to have your daughter back by 10 p.m. curfew." And they take her out on a nice date at a nice restaurant and they go stand up paddle boarding and he has her back by 9:59 p.m. And this goes on for months and they think they're madly in love with each other. And then all of a sudden one day the guy goes, "Hey, I need you to get with my friend. Remember when he loaned me money because my family was hard up and my dad lost his job? Well, he wants the money back and I can't pay him back. But he said, if you just get with him, baby, that he'll erase the debt." And the girl's like, "I don't want to get with your friend. I'm in love with you." Like, no, no, no. But he keeps working on her, working on her. And finally she's like, "Okay, just this one time." And what she doesn't know is he's video recording the whole thing. He's taking stills, he's rolling video on that. And 2 nights later, he's like, "All right, babe, you're going to do it again." And she's like, "Nuh-uh, that was a one-time thing to pay off your debt or whatever. And I'm not going to get with more of your friends and have them pay you for what are you talking about? We're in love. Who, Jekyll and Hyde, like what happened to you here?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're going to get with whoever I say you will because I took photos of you. And if you don't, I'm going to send these to the whole damn high school and your mother, who's an attorney, and your father, who's a pastor, and everybody at your church. And you'll be the laughing stock of your town." And guess what that is? That's sextortion.
Hey Lee, how is it going?
It is going great, my friend. Thanks for having me today. It's good seeing you twice in one week.
Oh yeah, it's always a pleasure. Somebody that speaks normal white trash. Not that you're white trash, but I need somebody that can speak my language every once in a while too.
My parents had an auto body shop, and I grew up with a bunch of wrenches, tools, and nudie calendars on the wall at my at my
Yeah,
parents' office. So, I'd go to the law firm, and somebody would say the word shit, and they'd be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I hope I didn't offend you." I'm like, "Is that all you got?" Like,
yeah,
anyway.
yeah. It's people. It's weird. I didn't know any. I didn't know there was a different world other than that world. And then when I started hanging around people at church and stuff, and I'm like, they're all, "Oh, dang it!" I was like, "What's a dang it?"
I know.
I'm like, it's kind of weird. But anyways,
Right?
I wanted to have you on again because last time is more of an overall talking, but sex trafficking is something that a lot of people don't realize that human trafficking is, well, it's something that you sort of specialize in. That
Yeah.
you know quite a bit about it and everything. A lot of people. I mean, it's funny. I say funny in the ha ha. The I have leftist friends that know who you are. They're like, "Oh yeah, she's trying to start the rebel kind of stuff. Patriotic." I was like, if you knew what she actually did most of her time, I was
Right.
like, why would you even hate her? Because you don't like one thing that she agrees with. But
Yeah.
yeah, could you uh, go in a little bit because I know you know quite a bit about Ukraine and everything, and I'm going to let you steal the show because, well, you know more about it. I know a little bit on the law enforcement side, but other than connecting them to somebody, there I don't know anything.
Well, the main thing everybody needs to really take away and understand is it actually happens. Human trafficking is not just happening; it's happening a lot, and not just in a faraway country, but here on our own shores, in faraway countries, and everywhere in between. It is a huge, huge criminal economy. It's actually currently the second largest and fastest growing crime in the world because, simply stated, and you probably saw this as a cop, there's a heck of a lot more profit for the pimps in selling a 7-year-old girl to a sex buyer than there is in selling coke to an addict. You sell some blow to a guy who's addicted to cocaine, and he goes, "Yeah, that was good stuff. I need to get some more from you tomorrow night." Well, in the 1 day time span, you've had to take part of the money he gave you last night, run back to your supplier, your wholesaler, buy more cocaine in order to be able to sell him more cocaine because it's not like it grows on trees for free. And that eats into your profit margin. You get $100 gross, you're spending, I don't know, 20, 30, $40, whatever it is on any given day to resupply your stock, your cash to be able to keep selling it. But that is not the case with selling people, right? If you're selling a 7-year-old to a pedophile and that guy goes, "Man, I had a great time last night. I want to do that again tonight." You don't need, as the seller, to go buy another 7 year old in order to sell that guy another 7 year old in that intervening day that's passed by. You just continue to rent that girl over and over until she dies. And here in America, the FBI estimated when I first started doing this work back in 2013 that the average life expectancy once a girl or a boy was first turned out, which is common parlance for made to perform a sex act with a John, with a sex buyer, on behalf of their pimp. For average life expectancy from the first time they're groomed and turned out for a trick is about 7 years. And the average age they're turned out is age 12 or 11 if they're boys. It's actually younger for boys by a year. You don't have to be Einstein to put two and two together and go, my goodness, they're going to be dead or dying by the time they can legally vote. And that is a very, very sad thing. And death comes in many forms. It can be death by pimp. The guy gets pissed off at one of the girls in his harem and he strangles her or knifes her and leaves her for dead. It can be death by John. The pedophile guy really likes it kinky. He decides to strangle her while he's having sex and he goes too far. And she dies of lack of oxygen. Or it can be death by AIDS or some sort of STD or some sort of other robbery or violent act. It's obviously an intrinsically dangerous sort of trade or livelihood, or enslavement for the girl who's usually not a super willing participant. But
Yeah.
that's what you're looking at. And they expect that human trafficking worldwide in the next decade is going to topple drugs and take the top position as the number one criminal economy on the planet because there's just so much profit in it. Your only hard cost, if you're the guy selling the girls, is the Happy Meal once a day. They starve the girls, so they feed them once a day. Happy Meal if you're here in America from McDonald's, a few bucks, or half a cup of rice if you're in Asia, where I used to do a lot of work, or if you're here, you might need to rent a Motel 6 or a travel lodge room for 40, 50 bucks a night. But that's not a lot of skin off your nose when you're selling these girls 8 or 9 or 10 times a night, and you got 8 or 9 or 10 girls in your harem, and you're selling them for hundreds of dollars, and you're keeping all of it. These guys are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a week, a month, millions of dollars a year. So, to have to support a travel lodge room here and there once in a while, really no big thing. And with the explosion of cell phone technology, it used to be, if a guy was wired a little weird and he wanted to take a walk on the wild side, but he'd never done that before, he really had to muster up a lot of courage. That guy had to wait for his wife to go away, rent a car if he didn't want to be recognized, or take his car but risk that somebody might see him doing it, drive that car to the bad side of town, go find some dark alley where maybe somebody's going to hold him up or rob him, go up to the girls in the short skirts. He's never had to negotiate. He doesn't know the lingo. Maybe they're going to make fun of him. There's a lot on the line, and then he has to have the girl in his car doing the sex act and waiting to be busted by the cops. You guys, if you guys cruise by, right, Joshua?
Yeah.
And then leave. And that's like a lot of risk for your average accountant who's a little bit of a pervy guy. Now with a cell phone, it's super simple. The guy just waits for his wife to go out of town on her business conference in Chicago or San Francisco. He packs off his couple of kids down the street for a slumber party or to the Girl Scout jamboree or whatever, and he picks up his phone and he orders a Domino's pizza, and he's bored, so then he gets on Craigslist and he orders a girl or a boy, and he waits for the pimp to drive the girl or boy over to him, does what he does from the comfort of his own home, pays the pimp, and off they go an hour later. And his risk factor is virtually nil. I mean, unless she's an undercover cop, which is always going to be a risk, even if he's out on the street, he's managed to really, really make it a very comfortable, easy experience for him. And so there's just been an explosion, really, in sex trafficking, hampered by the fact that we're tying the hands of the good cops like you. I mean, we're not prosecuting this. We're going the opposite way. In many counties and states, we're saying it's okay to engage in child love, and these aren't pedophiles; they're minor attracted persons, and they have a right to love who they want to love. Excuse me, that's rape of a child. That's not
Yeah.
okay. We can't normalize that. But Sweden went the other direction 15 years ago, something like that. They took buying sex, whether it was from an adult woman or an underage minor, and they put it on par with a U.S. felony. You got caught buying any kind of sex anywhere in Sweden, you're going away for 7 or 10 years. You're doing hard felony time in a jail. And you know what that did to the incidence of sex trafficking and prostitution in that country? Dropped it like a flippin' rock, like a lead balloon. I mean, to zero. All the pimps and traffickers were like, oh, we don't want to get caught in Sweden and waste 10 years of our life. We'll go to Amsterdam where they love us, you know? So
Yeah.
if we really want to unbundle the sex trafficking problem we've got, we need to start teaching our kids better. A lot of boys, but our girls too. You don't buy people for sex or for any reason. And then, because the awful reality is, demonize the pimps and the traffickers all you want, but if nobody were buying, they'd go back to selling coke and guns. They would be.
Yeah.
So if you've got demand, you're going to have a problem. So we need to get rid of the demand, and we need to be strong on the deterrence. I mean, that's why 10 years ago, when Congressman Ed Royce, who was the head of the House Foreign Affairs Committee at the time, put together a human trafficking congressional committee, he asked if I wanted to be on it. I said, hell yes. People were like, what did you do on that? I'm like, we tried to stiffen penalties and educate youth and get laws passed that would do both, because the more education there is, the less likely these kids are to fall prey to the bad guys of the world, and the more you actually use your criminal justice system, the less crime you have. Right?
Yeah.
Shocker, but anyway.
There's a lot of people that, unfortunately, don't think it happens. I was talking to you before the show that I have a friend that, we were talking about the Operation Underground Railroad, and he said, "Oh, that was just dramatized. That stuff doesn't actually happen like that." And I'm like, and that's why you get, when you hear Hunter Biden sleeping with Ukrainian prostitutes, nobody thinks anything of it because they say Ukrainian prostitute. They don't say possibly trafficked girl that Hunter Biden paid for,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and so it keeps on going. Words
Yeah,
matter,
they
and
do.
unfortunately, and they use a certain jargon like minor attracted persons to soften the blow and make people just kind of bypass and not even put a lot of effort into. That's wrong in all
Yeah.
ways you look at it. Is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, words matter a lot. I mean, they're starting the neurobiologists and the guys who like to study people's brains and words and psychologists. They've really started. We think that the words we use, like, oh, we have a thought, and then we want to express the thought, and then our words are a reflection of the thought. But what they're actually learning now is sometimes it goes in reverse order. We're basically talking before the thought is fully formulated, and the words that we're choosing can actually help finish formulating the thought, even though that seems very counterintuitive and cart before horse. But another interesting thing about our language is when you go to these Aboriginal tribes or deep in the jungles of the Amazon or Australia or deep Africa, there are a lot of native tribes whose languages are very centered around directions, for obvious reasons, right? And so instead of saying, hey, pass the fork by dad's plate, the way the language is set up, you would be saying something like, please pass the fork that is north of father and east of mother and south of the candlelight or whatever. And literally, like, that is how you describe everything, not just, oh, I'm going to go on a long walk or car ride and I'm going to talk about north, south, east, west, but everything that you do, like, instead of saying stand over there, you would directionally orient it. Instead of saying come here, you would say come to where I'm standing, which is, latitude, longitude kind of stuff. And when they put these 5-year-old kids, they take them away from their adults in the tribe. They blindfold them. It's like pinata on steroids. They turn them in a, circle 10 times, and they fly them 10, 15, 25 miles from their home base of their tribe, set them down in the middle of the jungle or the whatever desert, and they say, okay, little kid, now find your way back. These kids can navigate right back home. I mean, like a homing pigeon. And when they put them in functional MRIs and study their brains look like that of a London taxi cab driver. The spatial reasoning, all the geographical reasoning parts of their brain are way larger and more developed, right, than ours are. And there's similar tests they've done. Some of these languages have 50 different words for the color of green. Why? Well, they're living in the Amazon jungle and there's 50 different greens that they routinely see there. So
Yeah.
it's not just like dark green and light green and, Girl Scout green and whatever, jade and, I don't know, I can't even think of another word for green right now, but they literally have 50 different words for green. And then they'll study their eyeballs and they'll say, they'll show them a rainbow of the color green from very, very dark to light. And those people will actually say, yeah, I see different 50 different shades of green, and here's all the words for them. And then they put some American like you or me, in front of the same test, and a lot of people just go, yeah, that's green. And they're like,
Yeah.
okay, but do you see anything but green? No, there's just green. And maybe if we have four cones or rods or whatever in our eyes, we might go, oh yeah, like I see like five different shades of green, but we don't hold a candle to the society that's 50 different words for green. Why? Because you literally change your brain shape and your eyeball capability when you have words that compartmentalize it differently than a different society does. You actually see more, you see differently, you understand it differently and better when your language is centered around a certain concept, whether it's directions or color or whatever it might be. So when we say things like child prostitute, when we say things like, oh, it doesn't happen, or I don't see it, or, Hunter Biden was with some Ukrainian whore, we're really doing ourselves a disservice, because what we're saying is, and even I have to work at it, that woman wanted to be there. Well, she didn't want to be there. She's not getting to keep any of the money. She's really a slave if you view it from that viewpoint. And if she's underage, how in the hell do you become a prostitute? You're not legally allowed to consent to sex if you're under a certain age in most states. So let's get this straight. I couldn't consent to have sex with my boyfriend because it'd be statutory rape. But if some pervy guy steals me off the street and sells me 10 times and collects money for it, now it's perfectly fine and I'm considered to be a prostitute. Like, it really doesn't make sense. I mean, one for one, these girls, when you get them out of the life, whether we're rescuing them out of a brothel in Asia, like you see me doing here, that's her face is fuzzed out, but it's weird. Sometimes the camera almost depixelates the fuzz, but
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you're rescuing these girls in Asia or if you're doing what Tim Ballard and OUR does and going and getting them out of brothels in South America, or you're just rescuing them off the streets of Chicago or LA or Atlanta. Once they've had a little bit of love and a little bit of rehabilitation and a little bit of, hey, you're not chattel, you deserve more than this, you're a human being, you have basic human rights. One for one, these girls, once they've got their right mind back, go, yeah, I wasn't enjoying myself. It's not fun to be raped by 10 different guys who are strangling you and calling you a slut and giving all the money to the guy who's enslaving you. Like, nobody wants that, and they deserve better, and we deserve to call it what it is, because it enables us to do a better job fixing the problem when we actually name the problem. So language is a dicey thing, and it's fun. I was a social psych major, but it's fun to go off on that weird little tangent with my nerdy self and my nerdy background there, because it's interesting.
Yeah, I do like words. Now, granted, this is coming from a Gen Xer that doesn't get triggered by words at all, but I do understand that there
You and
is
me
a
both.
purpose. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I started admitting that I had PTSD, and I didn't like that because the word entailed weakness to me. And I was talking to my therapist, and she said, "Now, if she's we were going through this form to say what happened, and she's going, yes, this, no, this." She said, "Now if any of this triggers you, tell me, and you won't have to do this alone." I'm like, "Ma'am, I'm 43 years old." I was like, "I've done everything alone." I was like, "I don't get triggered." Then I stopped. I was like, "But it's just a word, I don't care." But they but people have to be on extremes. There's like, well, you either all words matter, like all these pronouns and gender identities and stuff like that, or no words matter. I'm like, no, it's context.
It
Words
is.
do matter a lot. And if you get that, like, well, we've spoke before, the fact that they were calling it an insurrection. There was a reason they called it that.
Yeah.
It wasn't just because it sounds cool. It was because saying that meant gave them permission to
To
uh,
prosecute.
to prosecute and to not have to do due
Yeah.
process and everything, because they for
Yeah.
some reason they got rid of our inalienable rights. I don't know how that works, but
I
apparently it
know.
does. um and and well, even now, if you'll hear a governor or something say, issue a state of emergency, and we're like, why? Well, because in words means that they have money access to, or access to
Yeah.
money now,
Yeah.
because they called it a state of emergency.
Right.
And getting back to this, I mean, throughout history, they've used indentured servants. You say indentured servants, people think, oh, it's no big deal. They wanted to do this. They don't understand. It's just another way of saying slavery. In fact, a lot of times the indentured servants, back in the, revolutionary times, their lifespan was about 2 years. You know,
Yeah, they worked
because
him to death.
yeah, because I mean, after an indentured servant, they had to actually give them a new enough money and horse and wagon and stuff to start a new life. Well, if they died, they didn't have to do that.
Right.
Slaves, you don't have to do that at all.
Right.
So I mean, words
Their words
matter,
matter.
and I can beat that dead horse a lot, but I
You and
noticed
me
that
both.
in conversations, it's almost why I don't like even having conversations on social media about slavery, stuff like that, because they don't understand words. Most people have no concept that
Yeah.
that that they it does matter that these girls are being, I mean, brutalized, and it's not a new thing. So it's
Yes.
strange to
Yeah.
me. I'm 43 years old, and it's just now becoming a thing that people talk about.
Right. And there's been a lot of criticism of Sound of Freedom. Oh, I don't believe it really happens, or oh, why didn't he take the survivor viewpoint into account, or oh, I don't know who funded it. It might have ties to this, that, or the third. And I'm like, look, everybody's entitled to their own point of view. Couple things to note. One, Tim Ballard never said he was making it from the survivor point of view. You can only tell a story really from a certain angle. And,
Yeah,
you don't read a book and hear, the girl who's falling in love's point of view, and then the guy's point of view, and then the mother's point of view, and then the best friend's point of view. Like, we'd all have whiplash if we tried to read a book like that. And the same is true for a movie. You want to tell a survivor viewpoint, slavery movie, go have a survivor write a screenplay and get it made in Hollywood. But that was not ever what Tim Ballard said he was doing, and nor is it honestly what I think anybody in that position could have been expected to reasonably do with 90 minutes or 120 minutes. He told the story he set out to tell, which is this is what it's like to go in and do this in a foreign country and try to get kids out. And I thought, having worked in that field exactly myself, albeit in Asia, not in South America or Central America, that he did a really fair job of doing that. And as to all the other criticism, okay, fine. But what you can't say is that there's been no discussion about it. Everybody's talking about it, whether they like it, thought they liked it, but now they're not so sure because of la la la, or maybe they hated it. Everybody and their mother has been talking about the issue of human trafficking. And from that limited single perspective, that is a very good thing. Because when I started doing this work back in 2013, nobody was talking about human trafficking. You know who was talking about human trafficking? One or two really awake pastors, a couple of faith leaders in each city who, would go out on the street and give meals to homeless people, and they were seeing the girls be sex trafficked. So there are a couple church groups, maybe a bunch of cops, right? And a couple of lawyers like me, and that was it. And we would have these task force meetings here in Orange County, and we'd go, and there'd be church people, and there'd be cops, and there'd be lawyers, and we were leading the way. That was at the time in 2013, like, wow, Orange County, California has a human trafficking task force. It was a one of a kind thing where all these different groups were collaborating. But outside of that one meeting every couple of weeks, it wasn't like I went home and my daughter was asking me about it. It wasn't like I went to the PTA and had the ladies there talking about it. But now, I mean, you just walk out on the street, you're standing in line at the grocery store, you're at kids' school, and people are like, hey, did you see Sound of Freedom? Oh my gosh, what do you think of Sound of Freedom? And if you are going to actually properly tackle solving a problem, you can't do it if nobody knows about it. So, I don't think those critiquing it harshly have really heard the fact that um, all press is good press. There's no such thing as bad press. The only bad press is when there's zero press. Even bad press is drawing attention to it. It's like when an attorney objects in a courtroom. Objection, the other person shouldn't have done X, Y, or Z. It was irrelevant. It was this or was that. All you've done now is had the jury talk about it in their head twice. The jury heard it the first time. No amount of you objecting erases that out of their brain and unrings that bell. And all you've done now is just taken the record player arm, pushed it back to before that track, and let them listen to it a second time because now you're all arguing about the thing that they're not supposed to hear.
yeah,
So it's a little bit like that. The deep state isn't aware that every time they strike at Trump, they're making more press for Trump, and more people are waking up to what they need to wake up to. And the same is true here. Say what you will, argue about it, say it's an awful thing, but every time you open your mouth, You're bringing awareness to the issue of human trafficking, and God love it. We need that. We need more eyes on this darkness. We need more light shining in these dark corners of the world because, where I work in Southeast Asia, if you're in Europe, we get girls out of brothels. They will occasionally self rescue. And by that, I mean, they think they're going to be a waitress in a bar. Recruiter comes to Ukraine. Recruiter comes to Roma Gypsy territory, Bulgaria, some impoverished area. Promises the girl the world on a platter. Oh, we're going to make you a cocktail waitress at a nice restaurant in Greece. Oh, we're going to get you working as a maid at a five-star resort. And the girl's like, okay, great. And I can send money home. And she's 15, 16, 17. And then on the way there, they drug her, they take away her paperwork, and when she wakes up, she's in a brothel being raped 10 times a day. But when she is rescued and you ask her, "Hey, did you know when what you were going to be doing?" She's like, "Hell no, it was a bait and switch operation. I thought I was going to be a waitress." And that is what it looks like in the Ukraine and in Greece and in Europe, where a lot of work was done by my anti-trafficking organization. But what I will say about those girls is they're often older. They're in their teens, often late teens, early 20s, and they have a hope of maybe stumbling on a nice young fraternity boy who is backpacking after his year at high school or college with his buddies, and one of his buddies who's maybe not quite as nice or raised quite as well is like, hey man, we're all drunk as hell, let's go buy a girl because we're in Amsterdam or we're in Greece and I know where we can do that. And the guy doesn't really want to go along with it, but he's like, I don't want to look weak. I don't want to, be odd man out. So he allows himself to be peer pressured into going into a room and a girl with a brothel. And he looks like a nice guy because he is a nice guy. And this Ukrainian girl who was kidnapped 5 months ago is being raped is like, hey, can I borrow your cell phone and make a cry for help? And the guy's like, yeah, I don't really want to be having sex with you anyway. And I didn't know you were here against your will. Go ahead. Here, make a call.
Yeah.
That is a possibility of a rescue. And where I work in Southeast Asia, these girls are sold by their families at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. They're from Laos. They're sold into the brothels in Cambodia and Thailand. It's a different language. And the men who come to rape them are hardened pedophiles from Amsterdam and Australia and Chicago. And this dentist or accountant in Chicago has spent an entire year, Joshua, an entire year planning to get an associate doctor in there to cover his practice, doing online research to figure out which town sells little boys or little girls. And when he gets in the room with his 7-year-old that he paid $500 to go in a room or whatever US with a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old virgin, there's not going to be her talking him out of his cell phone. First of all, she's from a village in Laos. She's never seen a damn cell phone before, doesn't have the first clue what it is, how to use it, never dialed a phone number before. Even if she could talk him out of his cell phone, she doesn't know the number to dial. She's in a foreign country. All the different countries have different numbers you're supposed to dial for help. She's never seen the number. Even if she managed to figure out the number, she doesn't speak the language. And odds are the cop picking up the phone at the other end is probably working for the brothel on his moonlight job. So even if she managed to reach out with the right number, bridge the language gap, luck her way into talking to a policeman, 9 times out of 10, what's going to happen is he'll be like, oh, yeah, I'll come rescue you, little girl. And, he's working for the brothel on a moonlight basis. So he comes and he takes her out of the brothel, walks around the corner, gives her back to some other sex trafficking, mafia guy. And she's just finding herself in the same brothel a night later, or maybe one brothel, a road over. So people are like, Leigh, why do you work in Asia? And I'm like, if I'm going to spend my time doing this, I'm going to go to where it's the worst of the worst and where these girls have zero prayer of getting out of these places absent somebody like us coming in. They're never going to sweet talk a John out of his cell phone because that guy's freaking Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer combined. He's going to Cambodia. He spent a year planning his vacay. He's not some misguided, guilty feeling frat boy in Amsterdam. You're not talking him out of his cell phone. And even if you did, that girl doesn't know the first business about how to place a phone call.
Yeah. I it's a rough subject to talk about. But it needs to be talked about. People need to speak about this. I've mentioned it several times that when I speak to a lot of Christians, and it seems like I hate on Christians, and I'm not trying to. It's the Pharisaical, but I'm like, you're trying to scare people into heaven when people have met the devil and he doesn't have pitchfork. Monsters are real and they look like us.
It's
And
true.
if it isn't for people that like yourself that is
Yeah.
going out there and doing something about it, nobody cares about them. They really don't. They care
Yeah.
enough to buy a movie ticket. That's, I mean, that's much, but people aren't going out there and doing it. My goal is to on my podcast and my T-shirt business is to actually a good percentage of the income to fund um, the end of human trafficking, not just sex
Yeah.
trafficking, but human trafficking in
All
general,
types.
because
Yep.
the slave trade out there is huge. I mean, if you have a rechargeable battery for
Yep.
anything, you're probably promoting
Yeah.
slavery.
Yeah, you're eating chocolate. You're buying T-shirts that are not made in America. You're buying any of the big name tennis shoe brands. All those factories are usually in India and Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, China, and yeah, they're not making the wages that we are required to give workers here in America, and it's an unfortunate reality. And it's interesting. You say, the people meet monsters all the time and they don't necessarily recognize them. Georgia, the state here, not the one by Russia,
Yeah.
they did a study years ago and they wanted to see what the online buying habits of pedophiles were. And they placed an ad online for regular sex for purchase, not specifically minor, having sex with an underage minor. And they got all these guys, hitting on it, and they gave him a warning initially, a very mild warning, and it was like, "Hey, we might be out of adults being prostitutes tonight, so let us know if you want to proceed, even if we're out of adults." And if the guy kept going with the transaction after that first warning, they got a second warning, and it was, "Hey, you're going to be buying a kid for sex in all likelihood. Are you okay with that?" And if the guy proceeded past the second warning, he got a third warning, which was, "Hey, mofo, you're buying a kid for sex, and it's heavily illegal pretty much in every single state in America. You sure you want to hit buy now, and complete the
Yeah.
transaction?" And the question in the first instance that they wanted to answer is, what percentage of these men would continue? Maybe they weren't looking for sex with a minor to start with, but when the option appeared, would they bail, or would they stick it out and go, "Yeah, I'll have sex with a girl, underage girl"? And it was half. It was something like 47, 49%, just
Wow.
under half of the men who had started out wanting to buy an adult for sex were like, "Oh yeah, I can't get an adult. Sure, give me a 13-year-old. I don't care." And then they parsed it down further, and they were like, "Who are these men?" It's
Yeah.
not who Hollywood would have us think. It's not the non-Caucasian dude, old, binoculars in the panel van, wearing his trench coat with no skivvies on, waiting to flash your kid at the junior high school when nobody's looking. That is not who was buying kids for sex. These men were upper middle class from the good side of Atlanta, not the bad side of Atlanta, Georgia. And they had on average 2.3 kids, just like the average American does, white picket fence. They were working in a white collar industry. The wife was working in a white collar industry. They were basically upper middle class white guys, and with jobs and wives and normal careers. And so people say all the time, like, "Well, this couldn't happen to my kid," and I don't know anybody who's ever bought sex. And I'm like, yeah, don't be so certain about that, because these guys who buy kids for sex, they could be your accountant or your soccer kids coach for your kid, or your pastor or your priest, or even your own husband or brother or uncle. And by the way, you think your kids are safe because they're a D1 volleyball girl, like my daughter, went to a D1 volleyball high school here in Orange County, and 4.3 GPA, taking all online honors, AP classes, yada, yada. Yeah, we've rescued girls like that here in America. And they fall in love with some young guy in high school. But you know what? he's not just a boyfriend, he's a pimp. He's not 16, he's 23 years old. And he enrolled in high school. Why? Not because he needed to. He already went through high school once. He enrolled so he could recruit girls. But they do it real slow. They call it Romeo pimping instead of gorilla pimping, where they
Yeah.
kidnap the girl, though it be, the Taken with Liam Neeson. We're all familiar with that model. They go up to your daughter. They look for a slightly unself confident young girl, which is every girl at some point in high school has a bad day, doesn't feel super confident, right? And they fall in love with her and they ask her out on a date and they say, "Oh, nice to meet you, Mrs. Jones, and sir, nice to meet you, and I'm going to have your daughter back by 10 p.m. curfew." And they take her out on a nice date at a nice restaurant and they go stand up paddle boarding and he has her back by 9:59 p.m. And this goes on for months and they think they're
Yeah.
madly in love with each other. And then all of a sudden one day the guy goes, "Hey, I need you to get with my friend. Remember when
Yeah.
he loaned me money because my family was hard up and my dad lost his job? Well, he wants the money back and I can't pay him back. But he said, if you just get with him, baby, that he'll erase the debt." And the girl's like, "I don't want to get with your friend. I'm in love with you." Like, no, no, no. But he keeps working on her. And finally, she's like, "Okay, just this one time." And what she doesn't know is he's video recording the whole thing. He's taking stills, he's rolling video on that. And 2 nights later, he's like, "All right, babe, you're going to do it again." And she's like, "Nuh-uh, that was a one-time thing to pay off your debt or whatever. And I'm not going to get with more of your friends and have them pay you for what? What are you talking about? We're in love. What? Who? Jekyll and Hyde. Like, what happened to you here?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're going to get with whoever I say you will because I took photos of you. And if you don't, I'm going to send these to the whole damn high school and your mother, who's an attorney, and your father, who's a pastor, and everybody at your church. And you'll be the laughing stock of your town." And guess what that is? That's sextortion. That's what the FBI calls it, extortion, but with sex involved. And the girl goes, "Okay." And so that night, he takes her out on a date, brings her home at 10, comes back after you go to bed. She crawls out the window and he goes and sells her all over the place for 4 or 5 hours, brings her back in time to get 2 hours of sleep and go to high school. 3 months later, she's down to 90 pounds. Her toilet, her grades are in the toilet. Her friends think she's anorexic. She won't talk to anybody. And you're thinking she's doing drugs. She might be, or she might be being sex trafficked. We have rescued girls just like that who were honor students where that was their story. So don't be so certain. The one thing you can do to make your kids safe is educate them on the signs that I just talked about. And the other thing you can do to make yourself safe is never be so certain it's not your husband, your brother, your cop, your mayor, your pillar of the community that is involved in sex trafficking and buying kids for sex because often it's the guys who look just like yours. Yeah.
When I worked in the, I kept my teeth in detention offices, jails, bigger jails, like Muskogee County. It houses, I don't know, hundreds of people. I couldn't tell you how many, but we had uh, we called it a pedophile pod. Now, not all of them were pedophiles, but they're all sex offenders. And I learned very quickly, which I knew from growing up, the truth, but I didn't see the big picture truth. I just thought it was just people I saw that looked normal but weren't. Every single one of them in there looked normal. They're not the ones you'd see on movies that look like,
Right.
a pedophile.
Yeah.
Them guys, they exist, but they're few and far between because they they aren't as good at their job because if you look like a pedophile, nobody's going to trust you.
Right,
You
right. That's
know
the one that everybody runs away from.
exactly.
he
So
doesn't get
these,
he doesn't see a lot of action. He's not as big a
yeah,
threat because he looks weird. Yeah.
yeah, and so I mean, it was just, and they were as sick as it makes me. They were the nicest people. I mean,
Yeah.
they were respectful. They always did what they were supposed to do. They didn't cause any trouble whatsoever. Um,
Right.
but they will uh, they will ruin somebody's soul,
Oh yeah.
simply because they have a hunger to feed. Um,
Yep.
you
They
know,
have an addiction.
they're the monsters.
They are.
And I want more people to see that instead of getting they get slaps on the wrist by the judicial system, and I can kind of
They do.
understand because it's a lot of times it's something that's hard to prove, especially if it's with a child.
Yeah.
Because if you unless you have um, semen samples or something, DNA, you don't have a lot to go off of,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's
It is a hard crime to prove. I mean, and until recently, and maybe even still in some jurisdictions, I mean, the rape laws were absurd. You couldn't, a woman could not cry rape and have a cop even try to take it to the DA to prosecute unless two people had witnessed it. Well, guess frickin' what,
Yeah.
folks? Most rapists don't drag the lady into the middle of the street in broad daylight and rape her in front of a full crowd so that there can be witnesses to the crime. And I'm happy to say that a lot of those laws are now off the book after
Sounds like
the age of
Sharia law.
feminism. Yeah, right. But even still, even if you don't need a witness, you kind of need evidence. And little kids are not the best at telling a coherent
Yeah.
story. We know that from being parents. You ask them what happened, and you get the tail end of the story that they're excited about, and then oh, there's a puppy. Okay, but
Yeah.
who brought you the puppy, and what
Yeah.
did the puppy look like, and what do is this our puppy now? Did they give it to you? Or are they asking you to pet the puppy? Like, it's like 20 questions, on a
Yeah.
good day with the little ones. And the pedophiles know that, and they go after the kids that are not articulate and that are not confident and that don't have a good support system and that are young, because the younger and less eloquent and less certain they are and less under the watchful eye of parents they are, the easier pickings they are. And the pedophiles know this. I mean, they're not dumb people. A lot of them are actually highly intelligent, and they have vast numbers of victims. I mean, there was a study out when I was in college. The National Institute of Health had done a study on pedophiles and sex offenders, and I think the average guy in prison, um, for raping little girls at the time had a couple hundred victims on average by the time they caught up with him, and the average pedophile that liked little boys had something like 436 victims on average. I mean, these are prolific. And the other thing is, if you're not wired weird and or you weren't a victim, you don't understand in many cases just how easy and quick it is to abuse a child. Not stepping out of the sex trafficking, but just getting into regular old run of the mill sexual abuse. I had to tell my husband when we were dating and getting married and talking about having kids. I said, look, let me orient you because you're kind of naive, and that's a good thing, but not a good thing if we're going to be parents. I said, it can be as easy as you're all there at the beach or the picnic at the lake, and your kid's there, and, second cousin weird guy Phil sidles up, plops down on the picnic blanket, throws another blanket over the top of him, and goes, hey, honey, come on over. I got an otter pop for you. I got some potato chips. And he's thrown the blanket over your daughter's lap and his lap. And guess what he's doing? One hand on the otter hot pop, the other hand's under the blanket. And 30 seconds later, he's violated your child, and you're none the wiser. And it happened in full view of 10 people, which really screws up the victim because the little kid's going, well, heck, it's happening in full view and nobody's saying anything. And
Yeah.
oh my gosh, and it makes it even less believable when she tells the story, because the defense attorney is like, let me get this straight. You expect us to believe that Uncle Larry or Cousin Phil abused you in full view of your mother and your father and your grandparents, who were all sitting 2 feet away from you eating watermelon at the 4th of July? Like, you really think this jury of 12 is going to believe you? And that's the way it goes down. But you've got to teach your children at a very young age, their body is their body, their boundaries are their boundaries. If they feel uncomfortable, if they see something weird, say something sooner rather than later. You have to make it safe for them to tell you, not make them wrong if they tell you before the fact, after the fact. Don't force them to hug the weird guy in the family. If they have a weird feeling about somebody, you need to honor that. I'll never forget my daughter. We were at Lake Mead boating. You and I were talking right before the show, Joshua, about how I went boating at Lake Mojave last week, and we used to go to Lake Mead. It's behind Hoover Dam,
Yeah.
and it's real remote where we would go. It's kind of the base of the Grand Canyon. And my daughter was maybe 2. I mean, she was toddler age-ish. And this little weird guy in a little boat, like a boat that you would see on a pond, like bumper boat size.
Yeah.
It wasn't like normal speedboat size. It was like it just sat him and one other person, and it was maybe 10 feet long. So he had come around the corner into our cove and parked it on the beach and got out, and he was trying to talk me up, and I was cooking burgers for dinner, and my daughter was hanging out, playing in the sand. And as soon as he walked up, my daughter started hiding behind my knees, and she was not normally a shy kid. And he gave me a hugely bad vibe. And pretty soon he's talking about all the prostitutes he's run in Vegas casinos, and how one time he'd killed a guy, and my husband wandered up, and I'm doing the like, hey, get him away from us kind of, when
Yeah.
he'd look away, I'd be like, so he's like, "Hey, why don't you take a ride in my boat?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'd love to, but I'm so sorry, I gotta stay flipping burgers. But I'm sure my husband would love to go with you." And my husband's built like you, Joshua. He's a mesomorph. He's kind of thick and Scottish,
Yeah.
and was in the military. He's not a skinny, you know, uh, tiny kind of guy. And so my husband hops in just to get him out of our universe. And then I cooked an extra burger, and I told my husband to take him down the shore, feed him the burger, and eventually he wandered off. But my daughter woke up the next morning and she goes, "Mama?" And I said, "Yeah, babe." And she goes, "Remember the man with the weird belt buckle?" And I knew exactly who she was talking about. It was this weird guy from the night before. He was wearing this weird belt with
Yeah.
his like shorts slash swimsuit. It was just weird. And I go, "Yeah." She goes, "He gave me a really icky feeling." And I had kept her like a mile away from this guy. Like I had
Yeah.
made sure that she was on the other side of me and I was in between her. He never hardly even got eye contact on her. And I knelt down and I said, "That is a very important feeling. You're going to have that sometimes in life. And you've got a really good radar detector. You have a really good internal alarm system. That is your sign that that is a bad person. And you don't need to wait for them to prove it to you. They don't need to do anything weird or say a certain thing. You can just look at somebody, honey, and if they make you feel icky inside, that's all you need to know. You run the other way, you come find an adult, you leave the room, you do not stay near that person. That is how we validate the internal alarm system that we all have, that gut instinct that we all have, so that our children grow up honoring the thing that keeps us alive, which is the weird feeling, and not ignoring it, which is what polite society tells us to do. Oh, you don't want to appear rude, so
Yeah.
go ahead and hang out with the weird guy in the elevator as he starts to rape and kill you because you weren't, listening to your inner voice and getting the hell out of the elevator before he decided to rape and kill you, right? Because you didn't want to rude
Yeah.
look rude. It may save your life. And if you appear rude once in a while, they'll get over it. If they didn't deserve it, they'll get over it. If they did deserve it, you've just saved yourself or your kid. And it's a small price to pay. And we need to do more of that. We need to validate those inner feelings we have if we want to get safe, stay safe, raise kids who know how to navigate to safety.
Yeah, it's sad our society has actually taught us to ignore our instincts. That we all naturally have the ability to sense the energy of others, but um,
Yeah,
religion has done a lot to ruin it. It tells people, "Oh no, you can't trust yourself. You have to,
right.
go question, go look at this, go." No, we are the best judgment of it, and most 9 out of 10 times, or if not more, we're right about what the
We
way we
are.
feel. I've always
Absolutely.
listened to nothing but my gut,
Me
and it's
too.
done me wonders and stuff. That's how I
Yeah,
survived what I did growing up. And I know people that didn't listen to their gut. They end up in horrible, horrible situations. Some of them didn't make it out alive
right.
because they're like, oh yeah, it's not a big deal. That's just it's just because he looks weird and stuff. I was like, listen, there's weird, and then there's actual
Weird.
danger. There's
Yeah,
weird.
yeah,
I'm an odd duck. I know that, but this isn't the weird that you need to worry about. It's that ones
right.
that you feel dirty just
Yeah.
being around.
Yep, exactly. The ones that make you feel like vomiting, running away,
Yeah,
that make your hair stand on end. There's a great book. I don't know if you've heard of it, Josh. Have you ever heard of the book Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker?
I have. I have not read it though.
It's a good read for anyone, but I would encourage your listeners, especially if you're a woman, especially if you got teenage kids, especially if you got girls, read it yourself and have your kids read it when they're 13, 14. The guy and and read past page 30 the first time you sit down because he starts by telling a story, a dangerous story that he was involved in, and you think he's telling it from one perspective, and it's a gripping story. I mean, it's a hostage situation basically that he's running the person through, and then at the end of the chapter you realize everything is not as it seemed, and you go, holy heck. So this guy has devoted his life to personal security, psychology, unbundling what makes people who are a threat and a risk to others a threat to others. And one of the things he did early on, I read the book in college like 30 years ago, if that gives you an idea. One of the things he did is he went through and he interviewed the ones who got away from serial killers. So there was one girl who escaped Ted Bundy and did not end up in the ground. There was one, the one guy who got away from Jeffrey Dahmer and didn't end up, the skull in the freezer. And he would take these people through their story, and he'd say, well, walk me through it. And they would, the first thing that they would always say, universally, without exception, was, I had a bad feeling, but I didn't want to look rude in the elevator. So he said he was going to help me up the stairs with my groceries or in the elevator, and I didn't want to seem rude, so I didn't tell him no. Or, I was standing at the ATM and I already had a weird feeling, and but I didn't want to just, I needed money, so I completed my transaction. I didn't just stop and walk away. Or they had overridden their initial gut instinct. And then he told this story of one lady who was raped. I forget if it was in Chicago or New York, but it was summertime. The guy had followed her up he calls it forced teaming, where the guy pretends to be your friend, pretends to be helpful. We're on the same
Yeah.
team. I'm going to help my teammate. Forced teaming. Oh, let me help you with the bags. Okay, I'm not asking you for help. I don't need help. But the girl's usually too polite to say no, right? So he forced teams his way up into her apartment,
Yeah.
and and forces her way in and ends up, raping her 5, 10 times. And then he says, I'm going to go get you a cup of water from the kitchen or something. But he closed the window a few minutes before he did that. Now, he had not closed the window at any point prior. And she said, I had another gut instinct when he went out to the kitchen, and it was like I wasn't even in control of my own body. He got off the bed to walk down the hall to the kitchen. I got up right behind him. I can't believe she had the guts to do this. So he's walking down the hall. She's right behind him, fully naked, bleeding, tiptoeing down the hallway. He goes into the kitchen. She makes a left, sneaks out the front door of her apartment, walks down the hallway, knocks on her neighbor's door in the middle of the night, stark raving naked, and is like, I think I'm about to be murdered. I've already been raped. Let me in so I can call for help. So when Gavin DeBecker is pulling the story out, what he realized is the guy had done the same thing over and over and over again and said, "Oh, just trust me." He would always say, "Just trust me," right before he would be untrustworthy. It looks like you're going to have to go, so I'll wrap this up.
Oh no, I'm with
But
my daughter's just giving my nose spray.
oh, no, no worries. Anyway, but yeah, so he takes it through, and what he says, I mean, one of the takeaways of this book is, look, when you get a gut instinct, it is not actually just your solar plexus giving you a weird feeling. It is your brain taking note of 5,000 different data points from the time the story started to the end, and saying, I could write you a book. I could write you a chapter and verse, Gone with the Wind novel about all the things that you should be taking into account that don't make sense about the guy's story, where he's lied to you, how I can prove to you. But by the time I get done, left brain logically walking you through it, you'll be dead. The guy will have already murdered you. So I'm not going to give you chapter and verse left brain. I'm going to bypass your left brain. I'm going to activate your lizard brain and give you this overriding feeling that you call your mother's intuition or your inner voice or your solar plexus or your gut feeling, your instinct, whatever, that says run away right now, because I don't have time to walk you through it. If you don't run away right now, you're going to be dead by the time I convince you of it. And it's a fascinating book because he actually identifies the techniques serial killers and serial rapists and bad guys use. He gives them names so you can start to spot it, like the forced teaming thing. But really, the upshot is, don't ever ignore your gut. It's probably not just your gut, it's a bunch of different things that your brain doesn't have time to fully process and convince you of. And it's a must read if you're raising girls, if you're a woman yourself, or even if you're a guy who cares about the women in your life. It's just fascinating, and he's very active in the freedom movement. He's actually doing personal security for a lot of the very high profile folks in the freedom movement. He still does that work. Gavin DeBecker does, and he's made multiple books since. But the first one, Gift of Fear, it's a good book to get. And yeah, anyway, I just love talking about this stuff because I find it interesting. What
Yeah.
makes serial killers do what they do? What makes victims believe? But was it Maya Angelou who said, "Believe people when they show you who they are the first time"?
Yeah.
I've not done that. I'm sure we've all had experiences trying to give people second, third chances, but it's fascinating. Human nature is a fascinating thing to unravel and unpack, and it has so much translation, and these are transferable skill sets to the freedom fight, to what the tyrannical overlords are doing to us right now, and why we got to wake up and stand up and fight our corner better and more effectively than we have been for the last 3 years. So
Yeah. I'm a firm believer in gut instinct or solar plexus, whatever you want to call it. I
Whatever.
think I personally call it a gift from God, but
Yep.
that we all have.
Yep.
I only listen to it first. I don't listen to other people at all.
Yeah.
I say that's my direct communication with God.
Yep.
Um, that's how I know things. And so far in my 43 years and living the life I've lived, I've never been wrong. And
Yep.
I'm not trying to be cocky about it. It's just that I listen. I didn't do anything but listen.
Yep.
Um,
Me too.
and people
I'm right there
don't
with
do that.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just I've never when I say something about somebody, it's to the point that Bishop Leon Benjamin has said in the middle of church, you he's talking about me. He said Joshua may be crazy, but if he says something about somebody, believe him. And it's true. People trust me when I say something about somebody because I just go off of my gut. I don't let any of the way they look, the way they act, none of that judges anything to me.
Yep.
I mean
Yep.
that's okay to think about, but it's really that gut instinct. And people don't teach their kids; they teach them to go against it. People don't teach their kids how to listen. Um,
Right.
and to really listen in between what somebody's saying and what their intent is. I'm a strong believer in teaching my daughter to be strong, not safe. Um, uh, being strong, and that sounds counterintuitive if you don't think about it too much. Safe is like protecting her from all any like hearing about stuff. I don't watch what I say around my daughter. The world is cruel, and if she doesn't understand that the world is cruel, she's going to do something stupid.
Yeah.
Um,
I
if she,
I took my daughter to the killing fields of Cambodia at age
yep,
8, and it was sort of an accidental tourist moment, but it was the best darn thing that I could have done. I mean, the girl, we were trying to do it PG. There was an audio track, and I was listening a track ahead, and if it was too gory, we were fast forwarding it. But
yeah,
she was getting the benefit of most of it. But I didn't know at the end of that whole thing that they would have a 3-story tall Rubik's cube glass case full of skulls that had
yeah.
washed up from the
Oh God,
genocide that they Cambodians put in a glass case. And my daughter went running over to the only structure in the middle of the fields at the end of the walk, and by the time we caught up, she's eyeballed the eye socket with the skull, and she asked, "Mama, how did it happen?" And I said, "Those in power lied to the people, and by the time they figured it out, it was too darn late. Let it be a lesson to you. Do not believe people who are in power just because they're in power. If anything, as a baseline, you assume they're not telling you the truth,
yeah,
and you got to use your critical reasoning skills and your common sense. Those are paramount. But if there's ever a disconnect between what your brain is telling you and what's coming out of down here, your solar plexus, you go with your gut because your gut
yeah,
will never lead you wrong. It never, like you, in 51 years, it's never led me wrong. The only times I've gotten into trouble is when I didn't listen to it. And those are very few and far between.
yeah,
If you grow up in a chaotic household, if you grow up in a communist country, if you marry a bad man who beats the shit out of you, if you grow up with child abuse or anything like that, the people that you see who are still walking this planet who didn't succumb to that, the reason they're here, they learned early and they learned well. You listen to your flipping gut because that's what's going to keep you alive to see another day. And a lot of the patriots would be well served to start listening to the communist refugees and the child abuse survivors because we've got one hell of a gut instinct on us that sounds the alarm early and leads you out of dicey territory. And God bless you if you didn't have to live through crazy stuff like that. But the Navy SEALs and the cops and the child abuse survivors, domestic violence survivors, and communist refugees, they've survived shit and they've lived to see another day. And if you line up behind them, odds are they're going to lead you better than the guy who grew up in the lap of luxury and has never seen anything more scary than an R-rated movie in his life. So
yeah,
yeah, we got to do a better job with this freedom fight than we've done so far. I think we're absolutely headed in the right direction. People are waking up not just to the sins of human trafficking, but the sins that their own governments are perpetrating against them with the communist agenda here in America and all over the world right now with the COVID BS. But we got a lot of work to do to fight down the evil. And the good news is, I get to meet people like you, Joshua, and all the other awesome podcasters and speakers and media folk at these events. And we're all the black sheep that I think are actually going to form up a new tribe and lead the rest of the world kicking and screaming, or maybe happily enough to a new freedom.
yeah. we're getting to the point where even the I don't like saying that we're on different sides. I think for the most part, leftists, they mean well. They're just leading with their emotions. Oh, I don't want to believe this. I don't want
Yeah.
this is the way it should be. If we start realizing that we're all on the same side, that we all want the same thing, um, we're just seeing two different. Uh, we're just seeing two different parts of the same elephant. Um,
Yeah.
and once we get there, we'll start making real changes. And I do think that we are, because I'm starting to see states make changes in the way they do things.
Yep.
Um, Even I've seen a lot of liberals start saying, I think I'm going to vote for Trump. You know,
Yep.
not that they like him. I'm like, hell, when I first voted for Trump, I didn't like him. You
Right.
know,
Right.
but but I also understood. This sounds bad when I say it, but I say you never expect a dog not to be a dog. He's a rich kid that owns a lot of businesses. You
Yep.
expect him to be a rich kid that owns lots of businesses. He's going to have that authoritarian type of tone
Yeah.
about things. He's going to be a
Yep.
little cocky, a little arrogant. I expect
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It's but what's he do with it? What's the actions he does with it? Because
Yep.
human trafficking and stuff, when it's big in an area, look at the government. Everywhere the government lets it happen, it
That's where it
grows.
flourishes. Yep.
And
Yep.
places that are strict about it, it doesn't. In
Right.
America, it's growing. And
Right.
when Trump was in office, he actually had somebody that oversaw that
He
in
did.
the White House, and they got rid of it as soon as
Yeah.
the Biden administration. What does that say about the Biden administration?
Oh, yeah, it says a lot. You judge that is exactly my axe to grind with a lot of folks. I'm like, look, you judge people based on their actions. These are these are politicians. You're not marrying the guy. You're not bringing him into your family. You don't need to love the person you're voting for. You need to be confident that they are going to do actions that keep your family, your country, your kids safe
Yeah,
and that make sense and that don't financially bankrupt you. And if you judge the guy by his actions and not by the fact that his tweets are a little bit harsh sounding, everybody says it. What I wouldn't give for a mean tweet instead of $8 gas in Monterey, California, right now, right? Like so. Uh, and Biden, we've got Hunter Biden laptop. We got an open border under Biden's, policy with Mexico. We've got Chinese immigrants coming in. We've got Middle Eastern guys coming in. We got sex trafficked, unaccompanied youth and minors coming in, flooding in through the southern border. You judge this by the actions, and they speak louder than any amount of words. And then you know who to vote for and who not to vote for. But yeah, I am also taking solace in the fact that a lot of folks in the movable middle are starting to wake up. Even on the mask mandate front, they're going, you know what, we're not going to do this a second time. Like
yeah,
we get it now. We see the writing on the wall. We're not going to do another few years of this. This is BS. And God bless them for it, because I've been waiting for the day that more people would see their see the path to truth on things like social distancing and lockdowns and mask mandates and vax mandates. But
yeah.
has it really been an hour and 1 minute already? Is that
Oh
possible?
God,
That's
yeah, it
crazy.
has. This is one of
Ah,
the
I just
subjects
saw.
that we can just keep
I
going.
could talk all day on this. I know, but your audience is probably like, are they ever going to stop talking about this?
Yeah, I did an interview the other day, and I still haven't released it because there's a lot of editing into it. Um, we ended up talking for an hour before we got on because you've had conversations with me, and then we spoke for 4 hours during.
Holy cow!
Yeah, yeah. So I'm like,
That's a
how am I gonna?
record.
Yeah, I'm like, how am I gonna do this? And in the middle, it's funny because he grabs a bong right here, and he says, do you mind if I smoke this? And I said, I don't care. I'm like, you're in your house. I'm not even wearing pants. So, you know,
Who am I to judge?
I'm like, whatever, mi casa su casa.
Right,
But it
right,
was,
right.
but we spoke about a lot of stuff. And when you get into the deep conversations, then me, I don't do short conversation. I don't know how. I
Yeah,
get awkward, very quickly when I don't know what to talk about.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so I'll
yeah.
say something stupid, and people will look at me like your husband's looked at me like I was retarded, because I was. And I'm like, I didn't know what to say.
My
I'm like,
husband loves you. He's never. He probably was just having a headache from standing on his feet all day or something. But my husband's always like, he literally just now when he brought me water, he's like, "Is that Joshua? Tell him I said hi. Like I totally need to call him about your new podcast you're going to do and ask him more questions than I thought of." I'm like, "Okay, I'll tell Joshua." My husband loves you. He's ex-military. You're ex-law enforcement and whatnot, and military. Aren't you ex-military too,
well, no, I
or
law
is it just
enforcement.
law
Everybody thinks
enforcement?
I'm ex-military because the way I act. I
You
was
have
like,
that
are
look.
you saying that
Yeah.
I'm an asshole? I mean,
No, I think you're an amazing patriot, is what I think.
a
But
lot of people actually have always, even when I got into law enforcement, when I first started, people assumed I was military, and I was like, it's just the way I am. I'm just,
I
it's
think
my
you're
past
you're
lives.
you're yeah, yeah, it must be one of your past lives bleeding through. But you're built like a military guy. You hold yourself with that military bearing, that whole very straight neck, and there's my husband is very similar with his
Yeah,
posture. He always looks like he's standing at attention almost, as opposed to me, who's I'm working on my forward hunch, and I have been since the day I was born. But well, yeah, it's just always such an honor to talk to you because I like to talk as well, and we get off and rolling. But do you mind before we say goodbye if I plug my new book?
I was actually going to ask you about that during that because I have your book in the other room and I forgot to put it in here.
I
Um,
have it here.
good. Yes, yes.
Okay, good.
Tell everybody about your book.
So the name of the book is Just Stand Up: My Fight for Freedom from the Brothels of Asia to Streets of America. That's what it looks like, or in real life, that's what it looks like. And you can order it on Amazon, and there's like an electronic version, which is exciting. Or you can get the hardback. But if you order it on Amazon, I literally make $0. And I haven't worked since March 14th of 2020 because I've been fighting for freedom and doing convoys and yelling at blue state governors and making TV ads to get rid of vaccine passports in Orange County and keep California out of the Warsaw Ghetto and by extension half the rest of the country. So I haven't had a lot of time, and that's great. But I'm also like you, born blue collar, probably going to die blue collar.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to actually, not have to go homeless like the rest of California this year. So if you buy my book, not from Amazon. You can buy it from leighdundas.com. That's how we spell my name. My mother gave me extra letters in the first name over there. It's Leigh, Leigh, Dundas, Dundas.com. And you can order the color version, which is a little bit more, but I actually have 20 pages of photos of the child brothel work. I really wanted to take people there, even the people who are too scared to go. This picture you see on the bottom, that is the blue. That is a pallet on the ground they sleep on and that they service customers on. And the teddy bears you see in the back of the room, those are their only witnesses, besides the Johns who come to frequent these brothels. So the town I work in, it's got 140 child brothels in it. They've taken over every bank, everything. The pictures on this page, that used to be a bank. It's all brothel now, as you can see from the signage. And across the river are radical jihadi terror training camps. So the first 2013 first year I worked there, that is what the town looked like a lot because we had 330 bombs go off, radical jihadi Muslim terror training camp bombings of the brothel town. So it's not a place normal America ever would probably set foot in. I don't. I'm not quite sure why I set foot in it, other than I'm wired differently than I think the average soccer mom. But I wanted to make it safe for you guys to be able to ride shotgun with me without it being dangerous. And so I wanted to include those color photos because the picture is always worth 1,000 words. And I tell stories. I talk about the brothel work I did. A lot of the chapters are about the brothel work, but I also tell really funny stories. I acknowledged my daughter in the acknowledgement section, and I gave her the book as she was going into a manicure appointment. And she came out an hour later. I said, "Hey, did you read the acknowledgement where I thanked you for helping with the freedom fight and letting mommy spend time away from you for all these years?" And she goes, "Oh, no, I didn't even read that part, Mom. I just started on chapter 1. You're really funny." She's like, "You're like Irma Bombeck." She's like, "I was laughing so hard. I literally, the manicurist had to tell me to put the book down so she could finish painting my nails because my hand was shaking so much from me laughing." And I go, "Really?" And my mother, grandma, was there, and my mom goes, "She's not lying. She's telling the truth. She's an 18-year-old girl. She, you know how it is. They don't drop praise indiscriminately." So General Flynn liked it. He called it a tour de force written by a modern day Joan of Arc. I think he was being a little bit lavish with the praise. But when your 18-year-old daughter likes it, and General Flynn likes it, and Mel K likes it, Joshua's got a copy. Hopefully, he's liking it.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I did something right. I wanted to keep it funny in places and then deep in places, because if I just did 400 pages of this is what brothels are like, we'd all want to commit suicide at the end, and that doesn't do anybody any good. I really, really wanted to, even when I talk about the hard stuff, I try to leave people with a lesson that will inspire them
Yeah.
and make them want to charge the hill in their town to keep their town safe for their kid here in America, whether it's on the freedom fight or sex slavery or whatever injustice is arising in your life. Maybe you've got an abusive husband. Maybe your mother doesn't listen to you. Maybe your kids treat you like heck. Maybe the principal of school is doing stupid stuff. Maybe your town council is doing stupid. Whatever injustice there is, I wanted to take the lessons I had learned the hard way in life, give them to you in the hopes that you could just run with the ball and get some good stuff done on this planet, because goodness knows we need it. So that's it. It's available for purchase now. I would love for all of your listeners to get a copy or more than one copy. Give your friends some copies, and rest assured, I will take the money that comes back to me if you buy it from my website instead of on Amazon.
Yeah.
I will take that money and I will plow it back into working for freedom for all of us.
I'll put the link down in the
So,
description. I learned how
yep.
to do that since the last time we were on.
Yay!
I learned a few things.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and I will say, out of I think I've heard you speak a dozen and a half times. Every single time, and being my job at the conference, I watch people. Everybody is sitting there just glued on you the whole time. The storytelling, it's immaculate. I mean, it's very, you can see the pictures, and I'm not very good at seeing pictures when people talk, and
Really?
I can actually see everything that you said. And in fact,
Oh,
a lot of the studies I can vouch for, because I've read the studies myself. And so you bring facts in with the stories. It's not just like a good storyteller. Any good preacher can be a good storyteller and get people, but until he's talking about something that's real, nobody's going to listen. But you talk about stuff that honestly I think every single person should hear, because people don't
wow.
know what the real world is about.
I've
So
heard some.
I'm a big
I,
believer in the book.
oh, thank you so much. You literally brought tears to my eyes just now, because I didn't know that some people didn't see things in pictures. Like I've always just had a great imagination. I read something, it's like it's a full movie in my head and whatever. It's just the way I'm wired. But I came across a psychology study some years ago that said some people, they see in pictures and some people don't, and some people are kind of in between. And my goal when I speak and when I write is always to draw a picture that's real enough that the person can actually feel like they're there.
Yeah,
And I know it's a more of a struggle for certain folks to kind of go there in their own mind. And so when you said, "Hey, this isn't something that comes up really naturally to me," but when you speak, I can see myself there. I can
yeah,
see the pictures you're describing with your words. It literally brought tears to my eyes. I wanted to
yeah.
cry just now. So that is high praise. Thank you.
It
Some of the
is.
best
I mean,
praise I've ever gotten.
I didn't realize that I didn't see things in pictures. I didn't put a lot of thought to it, because I see an emotion, and that's hard to explain to people. I'm like, I feel an emotion. I remember my past by emotions,
Yes.
and everything is an emotion to me. Smells are
Yep.
emotional to me. Every that's just uh,
Yep.
I hate saying it because I'm in the Bible Belt and it sounds woo woo, but I'm an empath. I just feel
Yep.
things.
Yep.
That's why I have a constant asshole face, because it's easier to deal with than to soak up everybody's emotions all the time.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
but um, but it is. I can't. If it's not impossible to see pictures, it's just it takes so much um, uh, word
Energy.
art. Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to talk in a certain way to be able for me to see it, that it actually impacts my emotional side, and I can suddenly start seeing. Like I saw the rats and the tests that you were doing. We talked about that one
Yeah.
time. It was a long time ago when you were giving that.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and I remembered that one and stuff, and I remember it because I studied it before, but I couldn't see the pictures. And then when you said it, I actually saw the pictures of what I'd already studied. And so
Wow.
it is helpful. And it
That
kind of
is
makes
some
me
of the
sound.
highest praise I have ever got. You made my day by I know all our listeners are probably going, "What the heck?" It's like the Mutual Admiration Society,
Yeah,
but I legit like that praise means more to me right now than anything I think anybody else has said about my book and my speaking, because my goal is always to connect
yeah,
and to be able to take people there. And you just never know if you're really hitting your mark, because I never really
yeah,
sit down and poll the audience. So for you to offer that up and say, hey, I don't always see in pictures, but when you say something, I find myself able to visualize it. That just
yeah,
means a ton to me. That means that my job has been done, and I can breathe easy knowing that I did what I set out to do that day. So I'm hoping that the book does a similar thing for the audience that reads it and is able to take them there. And that it motivates them. I always try to leave at the Clay Clark event or any event, the audience on a high note, on an empowered note, because we get more stuff done when we're, yes, I can do this, then, oh my gosh, I feel suicidal.
yeah,
So even if I'm talking about dark stuff, I try to wrap it up with, hey, this is how we're going to do it. This is where we're going to go. And I do that in the book. So you don't need to be afraid of the book. I tackle heavy topics, but I think I've certainly tried, and I think I've hopefully succeeded in doing it in a way that leaves us empowered and wanting to change the world for good for our kids, and not just be like, oh, that ruined my mascara, and now I think I
yeah,
need like a therapy session over it.
yeah,
That's not what I'm trying to do, and I hopefully I hit the right note and stayed away from you needing a therapy visit at the end of it. But even the brothel stuff. I mean, some of the stuff I told. One time it was the first night I was staying in a brothel, because when you get to the town, you're staying in a brothel. There are no hotels. And I jumped in the shower because I was filthy. I'd been traveling and it's hot, it's humid, it's tropical. I jumped out and there is a cockroach that is humongous, because we're in the tropics. Like, think Florida sized cockroach, like
yeah,
bigger than a baseball almost. And he's just totally giving me side eye, because I had hopped out of the shower, and I do this all the time. You'd think I would freaking learn, but I am blonde, and I had not eyeballed the towel section first. So I hop out of the shower, I'm dripping wet, and there's not even any towels. It's not that the towels are far away and I didn't scope that out first. They literally have like a slightly oversized washcloth, and that's it, right, Joshua? And I'm in a brothel, okay, a child brothel, and I'm looking at this thing, my only piece of cloth, and I'm like, oh hell no, I know exactly what that is used for, and I'm not wiping my body down with that. So I look over at the toilet paper roll, which is pristine and just come out of its little casing. I'm like, all right, I got nothing for it. I'm gonna just take a whole bunch of toilet paper and I whip it around so it looks like I have a big white oven mitt, and I start, toweling off, and then I rapidly realize there is a reason that God gave us toilet paper to not use as towels and towels to use as towels, because pretty soon I'm like a lint bunny. I have little pieces
yeah,
of lint all over me. And right around that time, I happen to like turn toward the threshold of the bathroom door, and I see Mr. Cockroacha, who's looking at me like, girl, what the F are you doing? You're scaring me, and I'm a cockroach. And we literally like have this standoff, and I'm like, it's a cockroach. Like, he doesn't have higher reasoning abilities, but he's looking at me like, girl, and I'm looking at him like, go back into whatever hole you crawled out of. And we had a stare down. It was hysterical. So even when I'm talking about the brothel stuff, I try to weave in these funnier little anecdotes so that you get an idea of what it's like. But again, it's delivered. Not
yeah,
not every chapter is going to make you laugh, but on the ones that are kind of inherently funny, where I made an ass out of myself in front of a cockroach, I have no problem admitting to it. And if it gets you a chuckle, so be it. Laughter is good. We release happy endorphins when we laugh. So
yeah,
there you have it. But I definitely run the gamut like I do when I'm speaking, laughing, crying, cockroach stories intermixed with sex slavery, with freedom and communism. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you get a copy, leighdundas.com. And if you want to catch my freedom work, you can go to my nonprofit, make a donation. The book is also there. There's a link to the book there. And that website is freedomfighternation.org. And I can't wait to see all your listeners and followers and viewers at the next Freedom event. And you too, Joshua. Are you going to go to Miami? Do you know?
oh yeah, more than likely, and unless something major happens, we're going.
Cool.
We
Awesome.
decided I'm taking my daughter. As you can see, she's right here. I am.
I want to see her. Hi, little
I
one.
am.
I saw her the other
Yes.
day in Clay Clark's event. Hey,
Yeah.
sweetie. She was there with your new dog and your
Yes.
wife.
Yeah. Yeah. They were there. It's funny. One of the uh, security for one of Clay's security guys.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
bought one of my "Don't Be a Dick" shirts, and he went. I went
Love
in
it.
and he paid me, and then he went there to go get it. And I was talking to him. I told him where it was, and he went up to my wife and he said, "Your dad told me to get the shirt from you." And she's like, and she looked at him. She's like, "You mean my husband?" So yeah, I was like, well, I am older than her, but I'm 11 years older, not any, you know. I was like, I know there's gray in my hair, but I
Right.
maybe I need to shave so people think I'm
Oh
younger.
my
People probably
god.
think
Right.
she's my granddaughter, which honestly, I am old enough to be her grandfather. But I
I've
started late
never
in life.
once, I have never once looked at you and thought you were anything but her sweet, loving dad. And you have the sweetest kid. You have two, right? You have two kids. One's
I have a stepson, and then I have her.
okay. That's what I thought. So two
Yep,
kids, one wife, and an adorable new dog that I got to
yep,
meet at the last event. Cannot wait to see you until the next event. And
yep.
until then, go with God. Keep doing good work. And my husband will probably call you to get some pointers on my new podcast.
Sounds
I'll
good.
let
I'll
you know
help.
once I'm up and running, and you can help out.
Hey guys, I want to personally thank everyone for liking and sharing my videos. Uh, if you want to continue to see my content, all you got to do is press that subscribe button and I'll notify you as soon as a new video comes out. I don't get paid for any of this. So if you want to buy some of my merch, like my shirts, like Jesus is a Badass or my Don't Be a Dick shirt, you can easily go to my merch store, which is at sogtv.org, which I will have it in the description at the every video. So push that, go buy yourself a shirt. I appreciate it. Have a blessed day, and I will see you at the next episode. Thank you.